Welcome to our Diverse Voices in STEM lecture series. This is our last one for the 21-22 season, and we've had a great series so far, and we're really looking forward to our next speaker. So Monica, she is currently pursuing her doctoral degree in biomedical biology, biomedical science here at Florida State University. Previously, she has a Bachelor of Science and a Master's in molecular biology from Lebanese American University. She's really excited about her research, which focuses on understanding underlying mechanisms of resistance of cells and of acute myeloid leukemia and the activation of anthropology, excuse me, I'm not a scientist, through the inhibition of the MAPK pathway. So while obtaining her various degrees previous to her doctoral journey here, she has taught lab classes and is also Red Cross certified. And she has a real interest in basically pursuing her research and also combining that with sharing her diverse story. And so we're really excited about hearing what Monica has to say. So with all due respect, let's go ahead and have her get ready whenever she is. And we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you for the introduction. And I'd also like to say thank you for everyone at FSU Libraries who is organizing this series. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my life and how I got to where I am right now. So what I'm going to be talking about is growing up, a little bit about my background, and some of the struggles you face when you move across the world to get an education. I'm going to be talking about my research background, a little bit about my research background, some of the pros and cons of getting a graduate degree. And I'm going to be talking about some lessons I wish I learned earlier and what it's like being a woman in STEM. So growing up, I was born in California, Santa Monica in 1994. And just a couple of months before I was born, one of the strongest earthquakes to ever hit California, or I don't know if the United States too, but definitely California hit. And my parents were feeling very homesick. All of our family and everyone we knew lived back in Lebanon. So they decided to jump on a plane and go back home. I really love animation, so you're going to see a lot of those throughout the slides. So that's baby me. I grew up in Lebanon, Beirut, for 24 years. I definitely consider myself to be a Lebanese woman. I'm very proud to be Lebanese. And after that, let's talk about my educational background a little bit. So I went to Sajjad High School, which was an English-based high school, and where I had a lot of international students, international friends. And obviously that helped me a lot in the future because everything I learned was in English. So we were also, Lebanon was colonized by France for a very long time. So it's also in our education system to learn French. And obviously my native language is Arabic. So now being out of Lebanon, I know that that's a really nice advantage to have, that I have these several languages that I can speak. So I graduated with a diploma in life science, and then I went into Lebanese American University, where I got my bachelor's degree in biological science. And so after that, I was really faced with this big question mark in my life where I had to decide whether or not I wanted to go into medical school or not. So it was a very strong moment in my life, and I remember it very vividly because at the time I didn't really know that I had other options except for medical school. I just knew that I was very good at biology. I loved science. I loved things like that. And I thought that the only option I had was go into medical school. But the more I went into graduating and I got older, I realized that that's not really the career path that I wanted to take. So what I did was was I got into doing some research, which is what I do now whenever I face any obstacle in my life. So I started doing research, a lot of research, and I found out that actually with a biology degree, I had so many options available to me. It wasn't just medical school. I had so many things that I could be doing. So another thing that helped clear my mind was I was taking this senior study course with a person who was going to end up becoming my principal investigator later on. And he went up on this whiteboard and he started with this one gene, with this one protein. And then he just started going, interlinking all these different pathways, talking about the MAP kinase pathway, all these things. And I remember just sitting there and thinking, wow, this is so cool. This is so interesting to me. I know that that's not usually, that wasn't everyone's reaction in the room. So I realized that that's something that I should definitely pursue. So I ended up talking to him after class, and he explained to me that I could get my master's degree and take this time to actually figure out what I wanted to do with my life. So I feel like a huge issue with people in our generation or the younger generation is you feel this pressure to have your whole life figured out as soon as you turn 18 or as soon as you go into university. And sometimes it's not that easy. And sometimes you have to try and see what you don't like to figure things out. So I went into my master's degree, and while I was getting my master's degree, I was teaching part-time at Lebanese American University. I was also privately tutoring several freshman students in a tutoring center. And I was receiving a certificate of completion of first aid and the Lebanese Red Cross. So after defending my thesis and getting my master's degree, let me just briefly talk about what I got my master's in. I was investigating the mechanism of resistance of acute myeloid leukemia cell lines. And I studied the inhibition of the MAP kinase pathway, which is funny because that's what got me into my master's anyways. And anthrax lethal toxin-induced cytotoxicity. So why did I study this? Because available treatments for AML, like chemotherapy, are extremely aggressive and are not very effective on elderly people or people who are immunocompromised. So a lot of you are at the younger stages in your life and you are thinking of whether or not you want to apply to a PhD program. So this is a common question that I get a lot. And is it difficult to get into? And then the short answer is yes, it is. It is very difficult to get into. And if I like this quote because it's hard. Of course, it's hard. It's supposed to be hard. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it, right? So this is how you usually feel as you're applying to grad school. It's very frustrating and it's very competitive, and it's a lot of, you're trying to convince people that you're good enough basically to enter their program. So what is my piece of advice as you're applying to a PhD program? So there's certain things that you have to have, which is obviously you have to have good research experience and you have to have good grades. But the thing where you can implement yourself and you can stand out is mastering the personal statement. So I really advise you to not try and follow like a template or copy something that's already found online or say things that you think they want to hear out of you. I encourage you to be authentic and show that you're passionate through your story and explain why you actually want to get into research. And that will make you stand out throughout the application process. So I got into a biological science PhD program at FSU. I packed my bags and I moved to Tallahassee. So when I got here, I really liked FSU. The campus is beautiful. My parents came to visit. This is kind of, I didn't realize that alligators were a thing. We don't have that in Lebanon. Hurricanes, we don't have that either. The humidity is insane. This is just like a little clip of a couple of months into being here, we had Hurricane Michael hit and we had to camp out in conference rooms in the bio building, but that was definitely an experience. Now, after being here for a couple of years, I definitely have found the places that I love in Tallahassee and grown to really, really admire it. So let's talk about the international struggle that I faced and a lot of people face when they move across the country to get an education. So this can be, it doesn't necessarily have to be people from outside of the United States moving here for an education. It could also be people, American citizens moving outside to get an education. So what are the advantages of doing this? First of all, you are obviously going to be getting a better learning experience because you're going somewhere where the education is more specialized to what you want to do. You're going to have international exposure. You're going to have a sense of independence. You're going to have better employment opportunities. You're going to learn new languages, gain a greater understanding of the world, enhance your network, develop strong cross-cultural awareness and communication skills. You're building an international resume, and you gain essential life skills, and it helps you build resilience. So the things that you have to come to terms with are that you are always going to pronounce words completely different to everyone else. You're going to have to answer to a completely different name. So the Monica and the Abou is the easy part. The Harb is like a little tricky. You're going to have to slip in words from a different language, from your language sometimes. You're going to spend hours trying to recreate a dish just like it tastes back home. You have to come to terms with the fact that you always have a strange hybrid accent. There is a culture shock when you initially move somewhere new, and that's normal because you're in a new environment. There's a new language, there's a new culture, and it takes a while to get adjusted to. Sometimes there's a language barrier, there's a difficulty understanding lectures, there's a feeling homesick, and there's a sense of guilt, which I struggled with initially when I first moved here because I was pursuing something I was so excited and passionate about. And I was very happy to be here, but I also felt very homesick, and that made me feel guilty. And I think that that's something normal and a lot of international students experience. So I just wanted to plug in the Center for Global Engagement here. I know that for a lot of international students, they will reach out to them, but you can also be an American student or whoever you are, if you feel like a little out of place or you want somewhere where you can be safe and experience different cultures, I definitely encourage you to check them out. Okay, so this was the first big thing that I experienced after moving here. So on the left, you have the biology building, and on the right, you have the biomedical science building. And you would think that research would all be the same thing, but there's specific specializations and departments, and they belong to different buildings. So in our graduate program, when you're rotating, you rotate first within 3 different labs, and every graduate program is different. And so I remember my first year, I was rotating in these 3 different labs, and I couldn't help but feel that I didn't belong to any of them. I wasn't passionate about their research. Not that there was anything wrong with their research, but I just felt like I didn't belong to them. Like that wasn't something that I wanted to pursue for the next maybe 5 years of my life. So I did what I always do when I'm stuck, and I did some research. And I found out that there was a biomedical science department, and it literally was right next to our building. And they had a lab that studied viruses and extracellular vesicles. And I was so interested in their lab, and I saw the research that they did, and it coincided with my experience and my research, and I could add so much value to their lab, and obviously they would have value from me as well. So I remember meeting with the PI from that lab and the head of the department from that department. And they said that the only way that I could do research in that lab was to transfer from the biology to the biomedical science department. And here I remember thinking, I was super overwhelmed. I had just moved here. Everything was new. But I had two options. I could just settle within a lab in the bio department that wasn't truly my passion and wasn't really what I wanted to do, or I could step out of my comfort zone. I could go through the interview process again, make the jump. And I did that, and I ended up getting into the biomedical science department and joining a lab that I was really passionate about the research, and it was a very good choice for me. So what I learned from that experience was that sometimes the people around you will try to give you advice or tell you what they think you should do. But at the end of the day, you really need to look within yourself, trust your gut instinct, and go with what you think is best for you. So I'm going to talk about my research background just a little bit. I study EBV, Epstein-Barr virus, and that it is a human herpes virus that latently infects over 90% of the world's population. So EBV spreads through bodily fluids, and that's why it's called the kissing disease. It's spread through saliva and kissing, blood and semen during sexual contact, blood transfusions, and organ transplantations. So in immunocompromised or genetically susceptible individuals, it can lead to Hodgkin lymphoma, B or T cell lymphomas, nasopharyngeal carcinomas, which is what I study, which is enlarged in the image in front of you, gastric cancer, and young and infants and teens infected tend to develop mononucleosis. So gastric cancer and NPC account for 92% of all EBV attributable cancer deaths. So I study extracellular vesicles, and without going into too much detail, there are different subpopulations of vesicles, and I specifically study microvesicles. And so why is this important? So these vesicles can be secreted from tumor cells and are used for basically creating a favorable metastatic niche. So helping propagate the tumor. So it helps in migration and invasion of tumor cells. It suppresses anti-tumor response in immune cells. It leads to endothelial sprouting and angiogenesis in endothelial cells. It converts fibroblasts into cancer-associated fibroblasts. And it leads to uncontrollable proliferation and migration and adhesion to tumor cells in mesenchymal stem cells. So tumor cells basically take advantage of these vesicles, and they help the tumor become more aggressive. For those of you who zoned out, please come back. I'm done talking about my research. I'm going to talk about my life again. So come back, okay? So now I'm going to talk about what it's like once you do get into grad school. What are the pros and cons of getting a graduate degree? So the pros of grad school are obviously you're getting to pursue your interests in more depth. You get an advanced degree that separates you from job applicants with only a bachelor's degree. You work with some of the top people in your field. It's still college, and technically you get to be a kid for a couple more years because it's not really a desk job. You're investing in your future. You get noticed in today's job market, which is extremely competitive. You get to contribute to the world's knowledge. You make connections with these amazing people. And one of my favorites is you get to travel for conferences. So let's talk about conferences. So within my first 2 years in grad school, I got to travel to Nashville, where I presented my data. I got to meet so many cool people. I got to visit this new city that I've never seen before. It's such an amazing, cool experience where you get to talk to other people in your field and basically nerd out about things that you can't really do at home or in your personal life. And then on the right, I got to go to an international conference in the Bahamas, and that was really cool. So let's zoom in on that for a little bit. So that's me, and I've never been starstruck before, but the person sitting right next to me is Clotilde Terry. and she is the president of the International Society for Extracellular Vesicles. And I was so nervous. I was so starstruck. She is such a pioneer in the extracellular vesicle field work, which is a relatively new domain in research. It's a new field. So when I first joined the lab, I read all her papers. I used her protocols in my experiments. So I was really excited to be sitting across from her. And then I had to present at this international conference. And I don't think I've ever been more nervous in my entire life than right before getting up on that stage and presenting to all these amazing people who are pioneers in the extracellular vesicle field, who are extremely established, and who I read their papers all the time. So I remember we had been there for a couple of days, and the majority of my time was spent practicing this presentation. I was very nervous about it. And right before I got up, I remember just shaking. And as soon as I got up there, by the way, Clotilde Théier is like right there in the corner. But as soon as I got up there, I remember just having this overwhelming sensation, like feeling of confidence, and confidence in my research, confidence in the presentation that I had made, confidence in the knowing that I had worked really hard on what I was presenting. And I ended up receiving an award for best presentation by a graduate student. And the lesson I learned from this experience was that practice does make perfect. And when you're giving a presentation, it's always the first sentence that's the hardest. So I like to make sure that I know what I'm going to say as my first thing, starting off, and then let everything else just flow naturally. Keep it simple, take your time. And another main thing that I feel like not a lot of people talk about when they're teaching how to present or explaining, like giving a class on presentation, is if you're enjoying giving the presentation, and if you feel comfortable, and if you're feeling okay and happy, that energy bounces off of you, and the audience feels that as well, and they as well will feel comfortable and will enjoy the presentation too. Okay, so you're probably wondering, what is this? So this is a memory in my head, and this is like a perfect depiction of an experience that I had. So I, early on in my PhD, I had told my PI at the time that I was interested in pursuing a career in industry. So he was working with a company in Tallahassee that will not be named, and they were working on starting a company, and it was a very basic supply and demand company. They had the supply, we had the research techniques, and they wanted to start something. And I remember he invited me to come to the meeting with him. And I remember walking into the meeting and looking around. Everyone was double my age, and they were all men. And they were all just sitting at the table, like how I feel like this slide kind of depicts. And I felt very intimidated, very nervous. And before the meeting, my PI had told me what the research was and what the company was that they were trying to start. So I did a lot of research on marketing and the consumers and the companies that were available and all these things. And I remember sitting down, grabbing a bagel, taking a bite, and then the man across from me, someone was presenting some data about the company and their strategy moving forward. And someone at the company turned to me and they said, "What do you think?" So at that point, I had two things pop into my head. One, I could nod and agree with what they were saying and just be a cheerleader basically for whatever they were trying to pursue in their company. Or I could tell them how I really thought or what I really felt about the strategy they were trying to take. And so I obviously chose option two, and I told them that I didn't really think that the path they were trying to take for the company was the right way. I didn't think that the consumers they were trying to target were the right consumers. I thought that they were a little late to starting within this angle, and based off of the papers that I had read and the companies that have already started before them, I suggested that they try using our research in a different way and targeting a different consumer. And I remember just an energy shift in the room, and even my PI next to me turned to me and was like, what are you doing? So then every 5 minutes after that point, that man would turn to me and ask me what I thought. So I feel like at that point I earned the respect, not because I was trying to earn the respect, but because I was being true to myself. And I ended up getting a position from them to do a marketing strategy analysis for their company, which I have no experience in marketing. But they saw the research that I had done, and they saw that I was well informed on the topic. And I did a lot of more research, and I presented a marketing strategy analysis, which ended up receiving a $50,000 grant for their experiments and for the company. Thank you, Chandra. So what's the lesson that I learned from this experience? The lesson that I learned from this experience was believe in yourself. Remember that you have value always. Always offer the right body language, talk firmly, and you being different is not a bad thing. If anything, I think it's a positive thing. You bring a new perspective to the table. Me being younger and me being a female wasn't a disadvantage. It was an advantage in that situation because these people hadn't done the research that I had, and they weren't looking at it with the same perspective that I was. So what are the cons of grad school? There are some cons of grad school, which are, it will take several years to complete. So it is going to take up some amount of time. It is very hard work and it's very demanding. There's no guarantee that it will advance your career. It is time consuming and you will end up working weird hours like on the weekends or at night. It does bring stress into your life and you have a lot of failure. So you have failed experiments, and that's just the nature of science and research. And that one time that experiment does work with you after you've tried it 99 times, it really does make it worth it. So at the end of my second year in grad school, COVID hit, a pandemic hit the world. No more conferences, obviously, no more traveling. This is basically what I spent most of my time doing. I'm sorry, Laya, she's gonna kill me for using this. Just a lot of video calls, a lot of talking to family. And I also decided to immerse myself in organizations that I was passionate about. So I became medical science liaison for 2 years. I am currently departmental liaison of graduate women in STEM. And I ended up doing a lot of volunteer work that I was passionate about. So here are some lessons I wish I learned earlier. Don't let others box you into their idea of what they think you should be. So a lot of people have this idea in their head, or it makes them feel more comfortable to categorize you into a certain box. Like, you look like this, so you should be doing this, or you come from here, so you should do this, or this is the path you need to take. You need to realize that you know best what's best for you, and you can really do whatever you want to do. There's not just one thing that you're supposed to do or that you're supposed to be. So make sure you have a strong support system because you will need it. Graduate school is difficult, and I used to think that leaning on others was a sign of weakness, but recently I've realized that it's actually a sign of strength, and leaning on others and having others lean on you, and that's basically what life is all about. So you don't have to have your whole life figured out. I still have no idea what I'm doing with my life. And I don't know if you ever actually get to that point where you know exactly what you're doing or the next step that you're going to be taking. And I remember I used to put a lot of pressure on myself to have the next 10 years of my life figured out and planned out, but that's just not how life works. And it's okay to just go with whatever is happening at the time. And this especially applies to research, right? Because you're going in there, you're trying experiments. If you knew what experiments to do, you wouldn't be adding any knowledge into the world. These are things that you don't know, that no one really knows, that you're trying to figure out. And that's okay that you don't know. So another piece of advice that I would give you is start tailoring your CV to your dream job. So as soon as you figure out kind of the path that you want to take, it's important that you make yourself stand out from other people, right? So try to incorporate things that you know will be appealing to the job that you will end up applying to in the future. Don't be afraid to embrace who you are and your culture. It's beautiful to stand out. So when I first moved here, I remember maybe being embarrassed when an Arabic word would slip out in my sentence, because I was also teaching at FSU or even with my friends, or feeling uncomfortable if the side of my culture like came out too much. And I think that like this picture explains a lot, and I'll tell you why. So back home in Lebanon, we are super affectionate people. So even a stranger, when you say hi to them, you like hug them and give them like 4 kisses on the cheek. And so obviously moving here, that wasn't really something that people are, it's normal for people to do. So now I don't feel like that's something I stop myself from doing, but I feel like the people that you want in your life, when your culture comes out or who you truly are comes out, they will know how to react to you, and they will make you feel comfortable, and they won't make you feel odd or weird or different. And those are the people that you want in your life anyways. So not everyone is going to like you, and that's okay. That's something I really struggled with, because it could be in your personal life, it could be in your work, it could be at the gym, it could be at the gas station. There's always someone that's just not going to like you. And 99.9% of the time, it has everything to do with them and nothing to do with you. And anyways, just having a couple or even one person on your side supporting you really outshines all the negativity. So you can't control what is happening, but you can control your reaction to it. I actually have fallen off of a horse like that once without a helmet. It really hurt. So the thing that I recently learned too was that I really like to be in control and know what's happening and have things happen a certain way. And that's just not how life works. So bad things are going to happen. And the only thing you can control is your reaction to it, and make sure that you don't allow that thing to consume you or bring you down. Acknowledge the situation, figure out how to deal with it, and move on. So grad school is hard, but so is anything you want to pursue. So my advice is that if you truly are passionate about research or the STEM field, it doesn't matter that it's hard, because whatever job you end up doing in your life, if you want to be successful in it, you're going to have to give 110%. So if it's something that you're passionate about, don't let the difficulty of it stop you. So this is something that I feel like it's talked about a lot, even more recently, that it's really bad to compare yourself to other people, especially on social media, your peers, your coworkers, whatever it may be. Without going into too much detail on this topic, I'll just leave it at this quote that I really love. Comparison kills creativity. There is room for you. Nobody can do it with your voice, with your experience, and with your insight. So what is it like being a woman in STEM? So despite global efforts to inspire and engage women and girls in science, women and girls in many countries remain excluded, held back by gender biases, social norms, and expectations. So that's why representation matters. And that's why I think that this whole series, Diverse Voices in STEM, is really nice, because you're showing that it doesn't really matter what you look like. STEM can be anyone. So let's just take a second and appreciate some amazing women in STEM. And I want to take this moment to talk about these women. So we have Marie Curie, who is a Polish scientist, studied at the Sorbonne, where she became the head of the physics lab there in the early 1900s and won the Nobel Prize in 1903. Tiara Gwynn, a 22-year-old scientist with a 5.0 GPA, helping build a rocket for NASA in 2017. Elizabeth Blackwell, the first woman to graduate from medical school in the United States, became an activist for poor women's health and went on to found a medical school for women in England. Jane Goodall, the most famous primate scientist in history, renowned for her work with chimpanzees and as a champion of animal rights. Jennifer Doudna, she helped develop CRISPR, the genetic engineering method that could allow for the eradication or treatment of sickle cell anemia, cystic fibrosis, Huntington's disease, and HIV. Rosalind Franklin, the British biophysicist known for revolutionary work covering DNA, as well as understanding X-rays and molecular structure. I love saying her name. Tu Youyou won the 2015 Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine for her work in discovering drugs which are used to treat malaria. And finally, Katherine Johnson, one of the first African-American women to work as a NASA scientist, making the calculations that allowed the first Americans to enter Earth's orbit and set foot on the moon. Obviously, I can talk for hours about all these amazing women in science, but I don't have that much time. So let's talk about being a woman in STEM. So I haven't started working in the real world, I guess. So I'm soon going to start applying to jobs. And from some of the research that I did, women make up 27% of STEM workers. This is a study in 2019. So it's really good compared to 1970, where it was only 8%. However, we still need to acknowledge the fact that men still make up 73% of all STEM workers. Internationally, there is an underrepresentation for women in STEM. According to Pew Research Center, men working in STEM make a 40% higher salary than women working in STEM. So one of the issues from my research that I did about why is there a lack of women in STEM or representation of women in STEM is that there's a lack of mentorship. So don't worry if you don't know anyone. Don't wait for someone to assign you a mentor. Reach out to a professor, reach out to alumni from your school, someone you met at an industry event or on LinkedIn, just reach out. So if you're thinking of pursuing a career in STEM, there is a very, very strong demand for it right now. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics projects more than twice as fast a growth for STEM careers versus non-STEM careers between 2019 and 2029. In 2017, the BLS found that 93% of STEM jobs paid significantly hher, nearly twice as much as the average non-STEM income. So if you're worried about that, definitely there's a very strong demand for STEM right now. And I will leave it at this slide. And I mean, the moral of, I think personally, from my opinion, this whole series and part of my presentation is that it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, what you look like, what you dress like, what your culture is, what your language is. There's always a place for you in STEM.